In February 2025, Matthew Campan's team at the University of New Mexico cut open a human brain and found something that has never appeared inside any human skull in all of recorded history. Not a tumor, not a parasite, not a new kind of bacteria. Plastic. Grocery bag plastic. Food wrap plastic. The exact polymer coating the inside of your takeout container right now. And it wasn't in one brain, it was in every single brain they tested. 52 brains, 52 positive results, 0 exceptions. The organ your body works hardest to protect was the most contaminated organ they'd ever measured. But here's what didn't make the headline. The brains of people who died with dementia contained 10 times more plastic than everyone else. 10 times. And nobody can fully explain why. That question is still open. This is the story of how micro and nanoplastics got inside the human brain, what they do once they're there, and why a 50-year-old industry lie is part of how we ended up here. To understand the scale of what happened, you need to go back to 1950. The world had just survived a war fought with steel and fire, and what came next was plastic. Polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, polyethylene terephthalate, names that meant nothing to the average person buying groceries in 1955, wrapping sandwiches in 1962, drinking from a water bottle in 1990. Global production in 1950 was roughly 2 million tons per year. By 2023, it was 413 million tons annually. That number climbed in almost a straight line for 70 years. And plastic doesn't biodegrade, it breaks apart. It fragments down into smaller and smaller pieces, too small to see, too small to taste, too small to filter out of most water systems, until the pieces reach a scale measured in nanometers and start behaving in ways the scientists who invented the material never anticipated. In 2004, a marine biologist named Richard Thompson published a short paper in Science magazine, less than a full page. He named something that had no name before: microplastics. Tiny polymer fragments accumulating in ocean water, in fish tissue, in the food chain. Nobody panicked. A few scientists took notes. The world kept producing plastic. What followed was a cascade of discoveries, each one more alarming than the last. In 2018, researchers asked 8 people from 8 different countries to collect stool samples. Every single sample tested positive for microplastics. 9 different polymer types. In 2021, Ragusa and colleagues found them in human placenta, not on the surface, inside the cells. On the fetal side, the maternal side, the membrane between them. In March 2022, Leslie and colleagues published what many researchers had quietly dreaded: microplastics in human blood. 17 of 22 healthy Dutch adults. A mean concentration of 1.6 micrograms per milliliter, flowing through their veins right now. Each discovery moved the plastic one step closer to the brain. And scientists kept saying the same thing: the brain is different. The brain has the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is one of the most selective biological membranes in the known universe. A dense network of specialized cells lining every blood vessel in the brain, pressed so tightly together they form something close to a perfect seal. It keeps out bacteria, most viruses, and the majority of chemical compounds floating in your bloodstream at any given moment. For most of human history it was enough. For plastic, it has one weakness. Particles smaller than roughly 1 micron, 1/100th the width of a human hair, can cross. They cross by acquiring a coating of proteins and cholesterol in the blood, a biological disguise that tricks the barrier's own transport mechanisms into carrying them through. Not by force, by impersonation. A 2022 study in chemosphere gave mice oral doses of 50 nanometer polystyrene particles for 7 days. The particles crossed the barrier within hours. They accumulated in brain tissue. They ended up inside microglia, the brain's resident immune cells, the cells whose entire job is to protect neurons from foreign invaders. And when microglia encounter something they cannot destroy, something indigestible, permanent, and chemically foreign, they activate. They stay activated, chronically inflamed, releasing oxidative compounds that damage surrounding neurons. Mitochondria start failing. ATP production drops. Neurons running on compromised energy stop firing correctly. This is not a theory. It has been replicated across multiple independent labs, multiple species, and multiple polymer types. Now the study itself. February 3, 2025. The University of New Mexico team published in Nature Medicine, one of the most respected medical journals on the planet. 52 human brains from the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator. Real people, average age around 50, different causes of death. They burned small samples of frontal cortex tissue at extremely high temperatures using pyrolysis gas chromatography mass spectrometry and read what came off as gas. Every brain was positive. The median plastic concentration in brains from 2024, 4,917 micrograms per gram of tissue. 0.5% of the brain, by mass, is plastic. Scale that to a whole adult brain, and it comes out to approximately the mass of a plastic spoon sitting inside your skull. Polyethylene was the dominant polymer found, followed by polypropylene. And when they compared that to other organs from the same people, the liver was at 433 micrograms per gram, the kidney at 404. The brain contained 10 times more. The organ the body was supposed to protect most was the most contaminated organ in the body. Under electron microscopy, the particles were not smooth spheres. They were jagged, shard-shaped fragments, roughly 100 to 200 nanometers long, with the irregular geometry of something that had been weathered and broken repeatedly over years. They concentrated around cerebrovascular walls and inside immune cells. And then came the finding that made the researchers go quiet. The dementia brains. 12 of them. 6 Alzheimer's disease, 3 vascular dementia, 3 other forms. Median plastic concentration, 26,076 micrograms per gram, 5 times the non-dementia average, 20 times the baseline from brains collected in the late 1990s. The plastic wasn't distributed evenly through the frontal cortex tissue either. It clustered specifically in cerebrovascular walls and inside immune cells, exactly where you'd expect to see accumulation in a brain whose defensive barrier had been compromised. The researchers were careful. They said they cannot prove the plastic caused the dementia. A damaged barrier lets more plastic in. The higher concentration could be a consequence of the disease. That is the charitable explanation. The other explanation is that plastic particles trigger the exact same biological cascade implicated in Alzheimer's disease for decades. Microglial activation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, accelerated amyloid beta aggregation. In September 2025, a study published in Environmental Research Communications by URI researcher Jamie Ross used mice carrying the APOE4 gene, the variant that quadruples your risk of late-onset Alzheimer's disease and is present in roughly 25% of all humans. They gave those mice microplastics in their drinking water for 3 weeks. The APOE4 mice developed measurable cognitive deficits. The normal mice did not. 1 in 4 people watching this carries that gene. Now here is the part that the plastic industry would prefer you didn't know. In April 1973, scientists and executives at the Society of the Plastics Industry met to discuss recycling. The conclusion they reached was private, kept internal for almost 50 years. Recycling plastic was, quote, costly, difficult, and there was serious doubt it could ever be made viable on an economic basis. That conclusion was never made public. What was made public was the opposite: recycling campaigns, billions spent on public messaging, and the chasing arrows symbol lobbied into 40 American state legislatures in 1988, designed to create the impression that plastic was recyclable, when the industry already knew the economics made large-scale recycling impossible. Larry Thomas, who ran the Society of the Plastics Industry for over a decade, told NPR directly, "If the public thinks that recycling is working, then they are not going to be as concerned about the environment."
The public thinks that recycling is working, then they're not going to be as concerned about the environment.
As of 2019, 9% of all plastic ever produced had been recycled. 9. The rest is still here, in the water, the soil, the air, the food chain, in your brain. The American Chemistry Council spent $22 million lobbying the federal government in 2024 alone. And in December of that same year, international negotiators met in Busan, South Korea, to finalize a global plastics treaty 5 years in the making. The talks collapsed. No agreement on production caps. Petrostates held the line. So what can you actually do? The honest answer first: there is no method currently available to remove plastic from brain tissue. No supplement, no detox, no procedure. The particles embedded in your frontal cortex arrived over years, and there is no known biological mechanism that clears nanoscale plastic shards out of tissue once they are there. What does have evidence behind it is reducing future intake. Switching from bottled water to tap water cuts estimated annual plastic particle intake from water by 95%, according to a 2019 study by Cox and colleagues. A 2024 paper in Environmental Science and Technology Letters found that boiling hard tap water before drinking removes up to 90% of its microplastic content because calcium carbonate precipitates out as the water cools and takes the plastic with it. Let it cool, pour off the clear water, discard the residue at the bottom. Free. No equipment. Peer-reviewed. Avoid microwaving food in plastic containers. Avoid hot drinks in paper cups with plastic linings, which shed dramatically more particles into hot liquid than cold. Switch synthetic fleece for cotton. These changes reduce the rate of accumulation. They do not reverse what is already there. The humans alive in 1950 were the first generation to spend their entire lives inside a plastic-saturated world from birth. The researchers in New Mexico were the first to measure what 70 years of that produced inside a human skull. What they found was 0.5% plastic by mass in every single brain they examined, rising every decade, concentrated at 10 times the normal level in people who died with dementia. The generation born in 2000 has spent their entire lives in an environment with 4 times more annual plastic production than the one those 52 brains grew up in. Their brains have never known a world without this. What that produces is a question medicine has never had to answer before. And we are going to find out whether we want to or not. This is The Sick History. If this is the kind of story you need to know about, subscribe.